So the wokey box ticking nonsense has now hit the gambling industry proper. So this week, Flutter have imposed a £500 loss limit for under 25s every single month that place bets with them. Unless, of course, you're a rich degenerate, then you could slip in the back door with some extra checks because you are a VIP. Now, this has rattled my cage a little bit because just a couple of weeks ago, the Betfair UK and I sports director come on, had a call with us, spoke about boosting liquidity and bringing more people over to the exchange to use it. And then this week, they've almost done a complete U-turn by effectively putting a stealth ban on 25-year-olds and under. Now, as somebody who's been in the industry for a little while, sees both sides of this, I thought it was about time that I created a video. So let's start off with a few facts and numbers. First of all, there's 68 million people in the UK currently, just over, okay? 47% of them have gambled in the last 4 weeks, the last month, which is a touch under 32 million people. Now, reported in The Guardian via a YouGov survey, they suspect that 280,000 people are problem gamblers in the UK, which is just under 0.9% of the total people that placed a bet in the last 4 weeks. And there's one suicide per day linked to gambling, which is very sad. It wasn't the only reason that was linked to these suicides, though. It's worth noting in the same article, because people were also bankrupt, in credit card debt, depressed and facing other issues. So that leaves a touch under 0.001% of the people that place a bet per year. Now, I couldn't find a figure for the under 25s whilst I was doing a little bit of Googling here, although I did notice that suicide appears to be sexist too towards men. Maybe that's the next big thing to be outraged about, I don't know. Probably not. Now, I don't want gambling harm. I don't think anybody does in the industry, to be quite honest. On a human level, it's extremely sad. And not everybody that has a problem through gambling ends up committing suicide. So it's worth noting that of that 280,000 people, there's probably a significant amount which have done damage to their own lives and their families' lives, and you know, I do have empathy for that. However, it's becoming quite ridiculous, isn't it, that we seem to be ruled by the minority. I mean, where does this end? So I was under the impression that, you know, once you become 18 in the UK, you are an adult, and it is a country where you have freedom of choice. So what you spend your money on should be down to you, surely. And I really don't think this is the way to go. There's lots of other issues to this. We'll come on to it in just a second. But in 2021, it seems like we're ruled by the minority. You know, you've got vegans, you've got rainbow-coloured police cars, you've got gender-neutral toilets, you've got people submitting for their ancestors' previous privileges and decades ago, which takes me on to something else that's come up here, because the director for National Problem Gambling Clinic, Henrietta Bowden-Jones, another toffee-nosed fucker that's telling us how we should live our lives, despite being born into immense privilege with a silver spoon in her mouth and probably having never tasted reality in her life, says that £100 a month limit would be disastrous and that the £500 limit should not be applauded. It's always the same, isn't it? I mean, some privileged lefty telling us how we should lead our lives, backed up with some bullshit study that makes absolutely no sense because they don't even know what they're talking about in, you know, a particular instance. Never mind the 100,000 people and taxpayers that are, you know, building businesses within the gambling industry. If you don't know what I'm referring to, earlier in the year there was a study from Dr. Philip Newell, who assumed that everybody who placed money into a betting firm from their bank lost that money and they were losers. So when he was questioned about this on Twitter after he released it, he just clearly stuck his head in the sand, come up with a few elusive comments which didn't make a lot of sense. But the point is, here, he clearly didn't know what a betting exchange was, where people exchange bets to and forth back between each other. Now, they've been around for 20 odd years now. There's lots of under 25s that use them, and a large chunk of the under 25s that do use them use services like Odds Monkey, Profit Accumulator, Profit Maximizer, Profit Rush, Match Betting. Low income households, under 25, students, single mums that are topping up their income each month by being a little bit smart with the numbers, using technology, using betting exchanges, putting money from one account across to another, taking the bonuses and pulling out a little bit of profit for themselves to top themselves up. So that was completely breezed over, and it was assumed that every deposit, despite it being their own money transferred between different accounts, was a complete loss. Now, this frustrates the hell out of me as a full-time trader that's paid premium charge on Betfair's exchange team too, because it's just agenda-loaded political waffle by people who are typically ambulance chasers trying to further their own career and get in the press. We've seen plenty of that with Football Index earlier on in the year, where somebody, yours truly, called out a problem with Football Index and said that it was going to be a big problem online back on the 9th of December, and they were not interested when I contacted them, including journalists too. Completely not interested until everything fell over, and then bang, the articles are there and everybody's running around like headless chickens trying to get their quote in the paper. No names mentioned. Zarb. Anyway, so who pays the price for this? Because it really is wrong. The thousands of students, the young single mothers, the people that are going about their business every day just trying to make a little bit of extra money. Also the people that are recreational users that can afford £500 a month. I mean, come on, £500 is not a huge amount of money. On top of that, you've got the issue of variance. When you're placing bets and you're doing it logically and you're doing it over a longer period of time, you're going to experience swings in profit up and down. 500 quid cuts you off at the knees, which also takes me on to probably the most important point out of all of this, which is the same problem that has been going on for a long time and people like myself have been banging on about. These companies should not be allowed to regulate themselves. It's putting the fox in charge of the henhouse. Okay, allowing them to collect more data, profile people more effectively, and then hold their hand up and say, oh, you know, we're going to stop under 25s, probably because that's one of the least profitable segments for them, that they can carry on unregulated. There needs to be regulation, but there needs to be regulation by a third-party independent body, a bit like Experian or something, but for the world of betting, to actually verify if people can afford this and if they are actually losing. Because when a bookmaker, for example Betfair, and they contact you and they say, hey, we don't believe you can afford to lose £500. The reality is you won £550 with Bet365, you lost £500 with Betfair. It was the same money, your exposure was covered between the accounts and you profited £50, but you're now in a position where you've got to tell Betfair, this is what I'm doing, and I've actually made £50 from this situation, whereby they turn around and go, you're a winner, we don't want you, we want to take lots of money from people, we don't want winners on our platform, close your account, restricted, you can bet £1, off you go, don't use our sports book. Now that is a massive problem, and that is something that these companies are using to exploit the average Joe, to exploit the under 25s, to exploit winners, and highlight them. So this data gathering needs to stop. It needs to be a third party independent body, and people need to speak up, because quite frankly the media, the racing channels, and as I experienced previously with Football Index, have no interest in talking for the end user. They're either talking for themselves for political gain, they're talking for themselves for clickbait and exposure, or they are paid by the affiliate schemes from bookmakers. I'm talking about Racing Post, At the Races, all these super affiliates, Odds Checker. They have the bookie's best interests at heart. It's not the end user, and that is not what's best for people or problem gamblers. Self-regulation needs to stop. The fox needs to stop being put in charge of the henhouse, and these toffee-nosed left-hard fuckers need to stop putting their nose in and claiming they know what they're talking about when they're quoting ridiculous things like Dr. Philip Newell.